Select view. It's a select view. Okay, I have this wonderful tool here, Google Maps. But before we go to Google Maps, this is large enough? No? This is what we have. Oh, these PowerPoints are available on Canvas under Files. The file names are kind of strange. It says like Spielberg, blah, 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 and there is chapter 1, 01, and then chapter 02, and so that's how you find them. But it's under Files on Canvas. So last time we talked about humans in general and about emergence of civilization. You know, what is a civilization? These sort of things. And now we get into the first civilizations that are the basis out of which Western civilization developed. And the civilizations of the Middle East, that is civilizations of Mesopotamia and the civilization of Egypt. The quote here, gift of the Nile, is from an ancient Greek historian, but I'll explain shortly why and how that works. So, we start with chapter 1. Mesopotamia means the land between the rivers. Mesopotamia, a Greek word, Mesopotamia. Potamos, river, and Meso in between. So, you have a lot of medical words like, I don't know, mesothelioma, things of that sort, something that is between. That's the stuff that I kind of talked a little bit last time around. Our species, Homo sapiens, sapiens, right? Other species that appeared in the human evolution, and they were not as lucky, or I don't know. Maybe we were lucky, but who knows that? But they're gone, right? Neanderthals, and they didn't make it. Okay, and this is really where our chapter 1 starts, with this thing, the Old Stone Age, and actually the New Stone Age, which we call the Neolithic. So, right? Old Stone Age is known as Paleolithic, like a paleo diet. Anybody does that? You heard of the paleo diet? No? Yeah, what did you hear?
That the diet, how we ate like back then.
Back then, exactly. Back then in the Old Stone Age. How did they eat? Well, hunting, gathering. So it's mostly steak and berries. Is that paleo?
Yeah.
You've tried it? But you've seen people doing it? Well, you kill something, you eat it, and then you gather something. What do you gather? I know of berries. People gather mushrooms.
Water. Water.
Water?
Yeah. They have to drink something.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay. Water. Yeah, water is important. I don't consider water food. That's why I was kind of, oh, why water? But
it's considered a resource.
yeah, exactly.
So
And you can flavor the water with berries and then get
Maybe water.
flavored water. Who knows? Maybe they did it. But anyways, for us, this is interesting. Neolithic revolution. What do they mean by this Neolithic revolution? Shift to systematic agriculture. Well, these books always use these fancy terms. And that's really confusing to a lot of students, I like to explain them sort of in simple ways so that everybody can understand. The invention of agriculture, that's what it is, the start of agriculture. And the agriculture starts with, well, here is our Newark, Elizabeth, we zoom out, New York, not here, agriculture was not invented here, but here in Mesopotamia. This is Mesopotamia, and you will need to know a bit of geography, actually quite a lot. So use the Google map and look for yourself, and you'll find interesting things. The rivers, you just see the lakes. You have to zoom a little bit closer to get to the river. The Tigris River, there it is. The Tigris that flows through the city of Baghdad. So that might be a question on the quiz. Tigris and Euphrates. Euphrates is eastwards. It flows on this side through Syria. This is Lake Assad, artificial lake. Here you see a little bit of a green sort of rim around the river. That's around the river. And goes into, and here into the, zoom out a little bit, the mountains of eastern Turkey. So both rivers have their source up here in the mountains of eastern Turkey. The ancient Greek calls it Anatolia, which means the land of the rising sun. Well, agriculture started in the hills and mountains of Mesopotamia. And the previous slide said it was about 10,000 BC. So that would be some 12,000 years ago. There are certain advantages to, but there are advantages and disadvantages to agriculture. Supposedly the paleo diet is really good, and archaeological excavations sort of confirm that. We know that from the skeletons of these people in the Paleolithic period, that they are a little bit taller and kind of better built, less diseases, less tooth decay than the agricultural people. Agricultural people ate a lot of wheat, which means a lot of, well, the gluten.
Like bread.
Yeah. And the good thing about bread, wheat in general, is that you can make it on your own. You can grow it in your garden. But it's not as healthy as the hunting, gathering diet. So it was a trade-off for many people. A lot of people, you know, they're even hunting, gathering society. Yes? Oh, sorry. There are even hunting, gathering tribes today. And many of them don't regret it that they never switched to agriculture. Why bother? But hunting and gathering society is more cruel, so to speak. In other words, if you can make it as a hunter, it's good. If you can't make it, time out for you. Over. Game over for you. Farmer society, agriculture society, a little bit different. You don't have a special skills and talents to be a farmer. It's a relatively simple thing to do. As they say, it's not rocket science. But it's not easy, but but I think it's easier than hunting and gathering. And that's what people went with agriculture. We want security. We want a field over there where we will make wheat and beans and things of that sort. Chickpeas. And then make hummus out of it. But agriculture necessarily connects you, well, hunting and gathering does too, but in a different way. With hunting and gathering, you have to know the habits of the animals, their psychology, so to speak. How can you approach them? How can you fool them? What you need to do to make them not aware that you're around and things of that sort. Agriculture requires a very different set of skills, and a lot of that has to do with climate. So for the next, I don't know, half an hour, we'll be talking about climate here in Mesopotamia. And the second place where agriculture started, a couple of thousand years later, is Egypt. And here you see Egypt with the river Nile. This is the Nasser Lake on the river, because there's a consequence of a dam. And so we will talk about agriculture in these two parts of the world, and they're close. They're both part of the Middle East, right? This is our Middle East. Turkey today. Syria has a substantial Christian minority, about 15% of the population. At least it used to be like that before the war. Now, who knows? Iraq also used to have a Christian minority, a little bit less than Syria, like 5, maybe 10% most. But Turkey is a predominantly Muslim country. Egypt, Syria, Iraq also, with the exception of Lebanon, which used to be about kind of half and half Christian and Muslim, and obviously Israel, right? Egypt also has a Christian minority today, but it's 90% Muslim. However, we're talking about ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia, the Syria and Iraq, and the rivers. So, we start with, what's the saying? April showers, May flowers. Is that right? April showers bring May flowers. Something along those lines? It's about the rain in spring. Why is that important? Well, geography here. Here, for the most part, Syria and Iraq are desert, very dry areas. And you have these huge rivers flowing through the desert. So the arable land is near these rivers. Arable means the land that you can work, right? The source of these rivers is the plateau of eastern Turkey, of eastern Anatolia. And these are very high mountains. They start from here and stretch all the way to Armenia, Taurus and Anti-Taurus, and whole bunch of mountains. These are mountain lakes here. The highest peak is the peak of Ararat. On the Turkish-Armenian border. And according to the legend that is also mentioned in the Bible, but not only the Bible, we'll get to that legend later on. This is where Noah's Ark is, right? This is where the Noah's Ark landed, supposedly. So people go and try to find them, and then they find the Ark in Kentucky. Why in Kentucky? You heard of it?
Yeah, I think I heard that there was a supposed rumor, like it was on top of a mountain or something. But
Yeah, there is a group of what they would call normally conservative Christians.
Creationists or whatever.
Creationists, that's a nice term.
Yeah.
Thank you. Creationists, they believe literally in those stories, and they would also go, you know, people of that kind, they would go to Ararat and try to find the ark. Anyway, some of them find something and claim it. Well, anyway. But in Kentucky, they built a replica of the ark. So you go to Cincinnati, Ohio, you cross the river, and anyways. I don't know. It's interesting to see. I think they charge you a lot. Like $25. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Okay. Need to work this one. Okay. These mountains are really high. We're talking about 15 to 20,000 feet. So that's Rocky Mountain high. And they're huge. I actually had the opportunity a couple of years ago to be here. And there is a large mountain right outside of here, which is 5,600 meters. And it's just an amazing sight because the whole of Turkey, when you start from here, it's like a plateau that is maybe 2,000 to 3,000 feet above the sea level. And then from that plateau, which is about 2,000 to 3,000 feet, you have these mountains rising to 15, 16, 17, and 20,000 feet. So it's spectacular. But it means that Turkey, especially this area, not the Mediterranean, if you're close by the sea, for example, like we are here in Jersey, we have a relatively mild winter. It's not like Minnesota. But you get inland, it gets really cold. Turkey is, well, one of the nice things that you can do with Zoom, with Google Maps, you can zoom out and find out that Turkey is, well, pretty much where we are, kind of southern Jersey. But as soon as you get into the mountains, the climate gets to be very different. So when the rain comes in early spring, April, March, May, that would be the May period, the snows here start to melt. And these snows carry enormous amount of water downriver. There is actually a system of rivers that drain these mountains, and the main outlet is this Euphrates on this side and Tigris on this side, and it empties into the Persian Gulf. So when that happens, there are a lot of what we call the flash floods. In other words, run. So in this part of the world, from the beginning of history, flood played a very, very important role. This is the place where agriculture was developed. Why? There are several reasons. It's a relatively mild climate zone. These floods not only carry water, but they carry minerals. The water, washes over many minerals and earths, and when it goes downhill into the valley, and that silt is very fertile. It works like fertilizer. One of the biggest problems that ancient people had in general was the issue of fertilizing. That's why, for example, a lot of these ancient cultures worshipped, in a way, not necessarily just as divinities, but had enormous respect for cows. Because cows poop, and they produce enormous amount of poop, and that's perfect as fertilizer. You throw it on the fields. So anyways, anybody who had grown something, you know that you can't grow things forever. You grow flowers, and the next year if you want to grow them, you have to add Miracle-Gro. Well, Miracle-Gro comes in several ways naturally, and one of them is these flood waters that carry a lot of silt and sludge downriver, and when they flood, they spread that thing over the land, and the land is refurbished, so to speak, renewed. But it has to also be done with, you know, cow dung and stuff of that sort. Anything that you can do helps. So, this is the picture that we know. The cycle of seasons that we know, that we live through. And therefore, all of these agricultural societies in the northern hemisphere developed similar religious views. For example, one of the tenets that you find in these religions, in particular in the religions of Mesopotamia, is the idea that the world is unpredictable. Or as Forrest Gump says, life is like a box of chocolate. Anybody watches Forrest Gump? So, you never know what's going to happen. Today's fine, tomorrow's going to be flood, or there'll be no flood, and there's going to be drought, and so, you know, strange things. Another thing that is associated with Mesopotamia is the cult of the dying and rising God. And that comes from, I don't know, I would think that looking at nature. You have a plant, and it creates a seed, and it withers, dies. The seed falls into the earth, stays throughout winter underneath, and then in spring it sprouts and the plant is reborn, well, born again, right? So that's the idea of dying and rising God that appears in these cultures, and it was fairly popular. Often these gods are called fertility gods, and in the Bible they get a very bad reputation. So those are the gods of, another set of gods that appears is the god of storms. So these god of storms, they bring showers in spring, so they bring wealth, but they bring unpredictable things also. You never know how the flood is going to turn out. Is it going to take away your house with it or not? So that's your agriculture in Mesopotamia. Now about the agriculture in Egypt. Now that's very different. An ancient Greek historian, we'll learn about him later on. That's the same guy who said, you know, that Egypt was a gift of the river Nile. He also says that when he describes Egypt, he said everything in Egypt is exactly the opposite from what we're used to. And he was speaking about the Greeks, but in general, like, have you noticed that the rivers around us, what rivers do we have around us?
Tom's River.
Hmm?
Tom's River.
What? I haven't heard of that.
Wait, around us, like in
Here in Elizabeth.
Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Oh.
Elizabeth River.
There is Elizabeth River, small, yeah, anyway, it's a little more like a creek. But there is like Hudson River, a big one.
Tom's River or something like that?
Hmm?
Tom's River?
Down, yeah, down in South Jersey, there is Passaic River. Heard of that one? Newark, Route 21. Route 21 in Newark. Route 21 will take you to Lincoln Tunnel, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And there is a river. That's
There's
it.
room
Now, have you noticed that all these rivers, well, they move, meander, but for the most part, they flow kind of north-south direction, from north to the south. Isn't that strange? Like the Hudson River, the Passaic River, there is a Hackensack River. Those three are there is a Raritan River down in by Rutgers, New Brunswick. And the rivers kind of tend to flow from north to the south. There is a reason for it, but you have to ask your astronomy professor. Like, so why did the Earth rotate up?
Like persons, like, at east, west, south.
Yeah, because of the centrifugal forces.
Oh, yeah, definitely, I don't know, but, okay. I know
Yeah,
what
if
you're
you
saying.
take astronomy, there is this anyways, it's complicated how it works. But so it's not that they always go north-south, like straight line. But in general, they go from the north and meander to the south. Well, Egypt is in the northern hemisphere. So it's to the north of, this is the equator, right? But it flows from the south to the north. So that's why Herodotus said it's strange. But what is that? There are many strange things about it. The source of the Nile flows through the country of Egypt. Here is the delta, where the Nile spreads into a couple of branches. And then all the way here to the Khartoum, the city of Khartoum in Sudan, where two main branches of the Nile come together, the Blue Nile and the White Nile. The Blue Nile comes from Ethiopia. And in Ethiopia, apparently, it has this beautiful blue color. But the White Nile comes from this area of Lake Victoria, on the border between Kenya and Tanzania. And it flows from there through the tropics, and then gets into the desert. When it gets to Khartoum, it's already in the desert. And then it flows for several thousand miles through the desert. This white thing here is called the Sahara Desert. Now, why are these odd things important? Because of the behavior of the River Nile, how it affects the flooding and agriculture.
Oh, because like in the Sahara Desert, of course it's dry, so they have to bring the water to the desert or something. Like, isn't that why they have like rivers? They have like these tunnels. Or, I don't know. Like they did that earlier, like way before. It's like in Egypt, they would bring like not how they did it, but they would try to bring the water or anything. They'll be closer to the water.
It's actually spectacular. If you ever go to Egypt, it's one of the most stunning things I've ever seen in my life. That there is this enormous river that is sometimes it's over a mile wide. And it flows through a desert which is absolutely bone dry. So when you zoom in, you have this strip of land surrounding the river. And then you come to a line, and there is no more green. You cross over the line and it's sand. I've never seen something like it, I don't know, ever. But what is really interesting is the pattern of flooding. It's very different from Mesopotamia. Therefore, Egypt developed agriculture a little bit later than Mesopotamia, and it was a very different kind of agriculture, and therefore a very different kind of society that developed. It has to do with hurricanes. In the northern hemisphere, where is the equator? Here it is. So, somewhere here around Cuba is the Tropic of Cancer, that's like 22 something degrees. And this area here, it's called the tropics. Well, here you can see practically as far as the green stuff stretches, these are the tropics. Tropics are funny. I lived in subtropics. So Florida is not exactly the tropics, it's kind of almost there. Anybody lived in Florida? Hurricanes. We had Isaiah, we had Laura. When did the hurricane season start?
Usually start around like fall, so around September, November, around then.
Yeah. They always happen in like August, September, and when does it end?
Starting winter, like around there, probably.
Yeah, by Thanksgiving it's over. And the reason for it is that in the tropics you have only 2 seasons. There are no 4 seasons, there are 2 seasons. The wet season and the dry season. The wet season is your hurricane season. And actually, officially, I think the hurricane season starts 31st of June or something. I remember like when I was living in Florida, when 31st of June comes in the papers, you get your hurricane supplement where they tell you, if the hurricane comes, run, basically, in so many words. And, well, these tropics, the wet season starts in July. So the rain starts, there's some like rain coming down in Africa or something. Anybody remember that song?
Oh,
Remember what it was?
it's like the Rains of Africa or something.
Something, yeah, I can't remember exactly how the words go, anyways. But have you ever experienced the tropical rain? Like you see here a little bit when hurricanes come, like when Isaiah came over, and tropical rains are, forget about the umbrella, you don't need it. You're going to be wet anyways. That's how they work. You know, here we can carry an umbrella and, you know, it's okay, I get a little wet, but it's fine. With tropical rain, you don't need the umbrella. So when this rain starts to fall in the mountains of Central Africa, actually, this area is called the Rift, the Great Rift. It's kind of like a St. Andreas Fault in California. The earth is sort of splitting here. The continent is kind of splitting along this rift. So that there are great mountains like the mountain Kilimanjaro, nearby to Lake Victoria, or relatively speaking, nearby. When these snows start to melt, the Nile starts to flood. And the Egyptians actually had a great festival around 20th of July. That's the middle of the summer. The Nile is going to start rising. So it was a festival that celebrates the beginning of the flood of the Nile. Around 20th of July. I say around because people are not sure. Sometimes they say it's the 19th, sometimes it's the 21st, so there is some sort of a miscalculation with the ancient Egyptian calendar there. But anyways, the Nile starts flooding, and it floods the whole valley. All that green strip around the Nile that you see here on Google Maps is flooded. So ancient Egyptians actually tried to avoid living on the fertile lands close by the river. They would live further away where there is no flooding or less flooding in general. And in the valley, they would build houses made of reed and something, temporary material that, if it washes away, who cares? But the flood of the Nile is slow, it's gentle. It's not a flash flood of Mesopotamia. It's not as nearly as dangerous. Furthermore, because of these tropical rains, the Nile carries enormous amount of silt. And then when the floods in Mesopotamia maybe carry a foot of mud with it, and it deposits over the earth, the floods of the Nile could carry 2-3 feet of sludge. So the Nile, the Nile Valley, the whole of Egypt, during these 3 months from July, August, September, turns into a lake. At least it used to be like that in the past. Now they build several dams and they kind of interfere with the natural occurrence of flooding there. And these dams are a huge problem because they kind of quarrel with one another, who's going to get what, and anyways. But that is only possible, to build this great dam and block the Nile that basically prevents the whole Egypt from flooding. This situation created an enormously wealthy society. In other words, you don't have to do much. You take a piece of wood, plant the things that you want, and you can get 3 or 4 harvests. That was a lot, and it was unheard of in the ancient world. So, by any measure, Egypt was the wealthiest society in the ancient world because of the richness of the Nile. The riches that the Nile provides. The Nile also, geographically speaking, the Nile is divided into the delta, and delta is called then the Lower Egypt. So that's also the other way around. So up is Lower Egypt. Why? Because it's downriver. Right? So the delta is called Lower Egypt. And the rest here is called Upper Egypt. So Lower Egypt would be south, and Upper Egypt is north. The Nile is enormous, and a lot of animals live there, including crocodiles, right? We have alligators, they have crocodiles. But in general, Egyptian religion is much more optimistic than the Mesopotamian one. It gives you this feeling, at least to me, I don't know how, if this is exactly what other people see. Egyptian religion is much more optimistic. There are monsters in Egyptian religion, crocodiles in particular. Crocodiles represent death, because they kill you, right? That's fairly obvious. They open their mouth and swallow the prey. Hippos are dangerous. It comes from the Greek word hippopotamus, which means the horse of the river. River horse. River horse. So anyways, that much about hurricanes, floods, and agriculture, right? Tropics. The weather in the tropics is a fascinating thing. India is also, by the way, a country that is within this tropical zone. And you see the hurricanes, well, they develop here, right, in the Atlantic. They start churning, and they come and hit the southern coast of the United States and Caribbean islands. One of the interesting things is these hurricanes pick up, the wind picks up the sand and carry this sand from the Sahara Desert all the way across the ocean into the east coast to the Caribbean and to the east coast of the United States. And that's why especially the sunsets in the Caribbean are spectacular. Because you have these small particles of sand up in the air high, and when the sun comes down, it creates this reddish hue. Sometimes you can see that reddish hue also here in Jersey when when the winds and the hurricanes bring, especially after Hurricane Isaiah, there were these spectacular sunsets in Jersey. And it's basically that these are particles of sand that are in the air, and they create a reddish hue. But anyways, let's see what do we have next. Well, I've been trying to tell you all this story by telling you about silly things about hurricanes and tropical rain and the Nile. And when you put it in scientific terms, this is what it means. Agriculture, pattern of settlements, trade, division of labor. What does division of labor mean? Yeah, different people do different things. So you have a village, first agricultural village in Mesopotamia or in Egypt, and very soon you realize that, I don't know, you need some people who's going to measure the fields. One of the big problems in Egypt, for example, was, okay, this is my field now, and then it's flooded for 3 months. And then the water goes away and there is 2 feet of silt on it. Where was my field? Where are the boundaries? So the Egyptians were quick to develop geometry. Also, they were first, for example, to develop a calendar. It's very interesting that Egyptian calendar is what we call a solar calendar. It's based on the sun. Mesopotamian calendar is the moon calendar, lunar calendar. So you have the lunar months. And it tells you a lot about, well, that would be a division of labor. You have somebody who's going to be in the village and who's going to draw the lines between the parcels and farms and stuff of that sort. You need somebody who is going to, I don't know, take care of the cows and oxen, and then it gets more complicated in terms of division labor. You have, I don't know, tax collectors. and the class of warriors.
Hunters.
Hmm?
And like, pretty much, like, someone's doing something. Well, it's that simple. It's like, what can you do for me? Okay, I can harvest the grass and all. I can
Uh-huh.
provide you security, or I can provide
Yeah.
you food. It's,
And eventually the big issue becomes how you pay those people. So they will be paid by a portion of the grain that you give to taxes, right? And eventually it comes to the invention of money. But money is a relatively recent invention. It was invented around 700 BC. Domestication of animals. That's like cats. Why did we domesticate cats, or did the cats domesticate us? Well, it kind of works both ways, because you have agriculture, you have to store wheat. Where there is wheat, there are rats. And where there are rats, there are cats. Huh?
Didn't they worship cats in ancient Egypt? And like, they not worship entirely, but they had like a meaning behind it, so it give them like life, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, don't they deserve something like? No, I mean, it's kind of logical, right? They perform a very important function. Not today. I mean, today, you know, we feed them just, you know, go to PetSmart and we feed our cats. But at that time, you know, you keep them because they protect your grain storage from the rats and, you know, name it.
Yeah, but mostly, I don't know if it was exactly like an Egyptian, like, I guess, king. Like, he believed that there was so much like luck tied to cats to the point where he buried, like, when his cat died, he took the eyes out and buried them with it. Something like that.
Yeah, yeah. And, well, talking about, anyways, mummification. Mummification is, well, mummification, let's start from here. It's a natural process in Egypt. Egyptian desert is so dry that whenever you leave there, it stays like it forever. It's the humidity that destroys organic matter. So, for example, you go there and you die in the desert, the wet parts of your body, like intestines and the brain, that's going to rot. Because bacteria is going to form and just eat it away and it's going to be bad. But the dry parts are going to stay, and they're going to totally dry out. So you can go to the Metropolitan Museum down on Fifth Avenue, right? Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Yeah, it's right.
You know where it is? Central Park, Fifth Avenue, 90-something street, 80-something street. And you can see the mummies. And Egyptians early figured out that if you want to preserve the dead body, you just take the intestines out, because that's where the rot is going to come from. So clean it up and take the brain out. There was actually a special ceremony that you break this bone right here and stick a hook in it and pull the brain out, and it comes out. And the body is perfect. And the same, they also mummified cats. One of the things that the Egyptian has was this belief in afterlife. That's a huge difference between Mesopotamia and Egypt. Mesopotamian people believed in afterlife, but you don't want to go there. It's not exactly our hell, but it's sort of a shadowy existence that is awful. You're not exactly tortured for your sins in that sense, right? Egyptian afterlife is a beautiful place where everything continues the way it was in real life. So you would like to have your cats with you, and your servants with you, and so on and so forth. So anyways. Let's see what else we have. Not here. Okay, Paleolithic painting, blah, 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 not important. That's the stuff we talked before. the spread of the human race, right? Remember from last time around, from Africa and across the Bering Straits and things of that sort. But we want to get to, right, some of the things that we discussed, characteristics of civilization. And they put it in a fancy way. Urban focus, religious structure, political and military structure, social structure based on economic power, development of writing, and significant artistic and intellectual activity. Okay, that's a nice way of putting it. You find this slide, this PowerPoint, under Files in Canvas. And I didn't take your attendance, right?
Oh, no, Sebastian.
No?
I don't think he did.
Right, what is your name?
Sebastian.
Sebastian, all right. Wow, everybody's here, wonderful. Okay. So this is a little bit of a recap of what we did before. Other early civilization in India, blah, blah, you can skip that. Mesopotamia, okay, Mesopotamia, we want, we took writing as an example of a sign of civilization, an important mean of communication that allow us to transmit knowledge, not directly from parent to a child, but actually to anybody who can read. Well, the writing starts as pictograms. Pictograms would be, our emojis. Emojis are pictograms. So little pictures that tell you something. LOL. Well, pictographic sign. A star, sun, stream, a river, water, barley, bull, ball. And then gradually you associate the pictograms with certain sounds. What I mean? Hus. Hus. What is it? Hus. Hus. Let's try something else. Banana. Banana.
Banana.
That's more obvious, right? I don't know what else. Potato.
See them?
So you would associate these particular groups with a particular sound. And in that way, you make a transition from emojis to alphabet. So, cuneiform signs as a piece of, a stilo, kind of a sharp pen, sharp wooden object that you engrave into a clay tablet. These are no longer emojis. These are now alphabet. And actually, I think Aleph are the words that come from Mesopotamia, and they continue in other Semitic languages. And Aleph comes from the mouth. and Beth is the house, Beth. So you have, I don't know, a lot of Jewish synagogues are Beth, Hillel, huh?
Beth Israel, the hospital.
Exactly. Well, it means the House of Israel Hospital. So, Alpha Beth. So this used to be a pictograph for the mouth. This would be a mouth, and this was a pictograph for a house. Is that a house? I don't know. Trying to simplify, you know, complicated, simple. I don't know if I'm doing it well or not, but anyways, that's the Mesopotamian writing. But I want to say a couple of words about the geography of Mesopotamia. In Egypt, there were actually no big cities, because the whole of the river valley was inhabited, and it was one continuous city, so to speak. There were villages, you know, here, and you know, then the land, and then another village, and so on and so forth. There are some cities like Memphis, for example. But which was mostly a religious center. It's not a city the way we see it in Mesopotamia. In Mesopotamia, people lived in the cities, not exactly in Egypt. Egypt is just very different. One thing that Herodotus says about Egypt is that all normal people, so to speak, right? We build our houses nice. We want our houses to be nice. But our tombs, we don't care too much about it. At least I don't know. Many people don't. You want something, but not too much. You don't want to waste money on the tomb, right? What's the point? Egyptians were exactly the opposite. They really didn't need serious housing. On their tombs, they would spend a great amount of wealth on tombs. Even, not just wealthy people, but even people of ordinary means. I don't know why it's that, but that's what we see. So anyways, so in Egypt, you won't find cities like here in Mesopotamia. In other words, in Egypt, we often talk, we talk more about the lower Egypt and upper Egypt. And then the capital of the lower Egypt is Memphis, and the capital of upper Egypt was Thebes. But both of these cities are really temples, religious centers. Memphis is really close to where the pyramids are. The pyramids are outside of Cairo. And anyways, in contrast to Mesopotamia, in contrast to Egypt, Mesopotamia developed cities. And those are the first cities in the world. First of all, Mesopotamia in three parts. The southern part we called Acadia. Now here it says Sumer, or Sumeria. Sumerians are sort of a strange people. We know very little about them. And they spoke a very different language from the people who came afterwards. We don't know where did they come from. They just pop up in the early part of history, at the end of the Neolithic period, right? We had Neolithic, what did it say? 10,000 to 3000 BC. That was our Neolithic. So Sumerians pop up in the late Neolithic period. They create wonderful things. This is the image, it's a box, a royal standard of Ur, a Sumerian king with his, followers and battles and you name it, and officials and everything. But then they were taken over by the Akkadians. So I'd like to call the southern part of Mesopotamia Akkadia. The middle part is called Babylonia. Babylonia, or Chaldea. It's often in the Bible, it's mentioned as Chaldea. And there is an ethnic group, in particular Christians of Iraq, are called Chaldeans. I don't know if you've seen them around, but they exist. There are several Chaldean churches in the neighborhood here in New Jersey. More towards New Brunswick. Chaldeans. And finally, the north, we have Assyria. Assyria in contrast to Syria. So Assyria is in Iraq, and Syria is Syria here. Ebla, the city of Ebla is the city in Syria. And then the cities of Assyria are Nineveh, Ashur. Can you see these, or is it too small? Small. Is it? Let's zoom a little bit more. So, better? Nineveh, Ashur, named after the high god of Assyria. Ashur was the god of Assyria. Mesopotamian religion is very tribal. So every ethnic group has its own tribal god. And when they come together, you have a system of gods that we call the pantheon, right? But not all gods are equally worshipped in every place. One is, so Ashur was the protector of the Assyrians. We have the city of Babylon, and the ancient Akkadian cities Ur, Uruk, Lagash, Umma, Eridu. But Ur is probably the most important to remember. We'll have our Epic of Gilgamesh, that I talked about last time around, is situated in Ur. In the Bible, Abraham. Who is Abraham?
Isn't he the son of Noah? Or he's a descendant of Noah?
Son of David.
Descendant of Noah, we all are. That's a safe bet, right? So Abraham, but he is the father of the Jews. In other words, he's often called the father of monotheism. So, according to the legend recorded in the Bible, he was born in the city of Ur, and then from Ur went to Canaan. Canaan were the people, Canaanites were the people who inhabited Israel, the land of Israel, before the Israelites came over. In other words, before Abraham. Phoenicia is also important to remember. It's a modern day Lebanon. Modern day Lebanon. And Phoenicians were a seafaring people. Tyre was a port city, and they sailed all over the place. Now, there is one more thing before we finish. Okay, let's do this. So Egypt, Lower Egypt, Upper Egypt, Mesopotamia, Acadia, Babylonia, Assyria. Pantheon would be when, you know, several tribes or nations come together and each one contribute their own god, and therefore they create a group of gods that we call the Pantheon, or the old gods. But we are talking about here the Bronze Age. That's after the Neolithic. The Neolithic, we're not going to go back anymore. But the Bronze Age is a period that started around 3000 BC, roughly speaking, to 1200 BC. What comes after the Bronze Age, it's the Iron Age. After 1200 BC. And all these changes from Neolithic to Bronze Age represent some sort of traumatic event. Like the shift from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age was traumatic. Why? Because bronze is weaker than iron. You make a sword or a knife out of bronze, and bronze is an alloy of copper and tin, and you make a knife out of iron. The iron knife is going to cut through the bronze like it's a cheesecake. So you can imagine that this shift from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age is going to be dramatic, because some people invented iron and they came around and they killed the people of the Bronze Age. We also divide the Bronze Age into early, middle, and late. Not too important for us, we are rushing through it too quickly, but there were certain issues that pop up here. So the Bronze Age ended around 2000 BC with the people called the Elamites, who came into Mesopotamia and finished off the people who lived there before, mostly Sumerians. Then Middle Bronze Age has to do with the Hittites, and finally the Late Bronze Age and the catastrophe of 1200. This is in Mesopotamia. Egypt is a little bit different because Egypt is much better documented than Mesopotamia. So in Mesopotamia, we don't know many things. We have a list of a king, but there is missing gaps, and you're not sure. So we stick with these like early Bronze Age, Middle Bronze Age, Late Bronze Age, and Iron Age. In Egypt, we have very detailed, reliable king lists. So we talk instead about the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. Roughly speaking, these are the same thing in terms of years. So, any questions? Okay, so that's enough. We have covered everything that we need to. And next time around, on Thursday, we start with these IDs. So we'll see how that goes. But for now, this should do. Right, let's turn on the camera and go home.